for those roads. They do not have a trash pickup service, no school on the island. But these were a tax would normally would pay for. So you're taxing the people, the residents, for services that the county doesn't even provide. So it's become a problem, and it's become a national problem.
Ashe. Mo dupueo, brother Ifabegmi. We all thank you for that excellent overview and bringing us up to speed on this most important situation at hand. I'd like to personally call out to every person listening to this to make some kind of effort, because this is so important that we, especially at this point in time, make some type of stand to let people know, to let the powers that be, the establishment, know that we do value our traditions. And this is the perfect time, the perfect situation to stand up and say, look, we're not going for it. The thing, the turning society upside down with recognition of certain sexual behaviors, certain sexual predilections, turning over of the gender roles and establishment. The way the kids are behaving today, things are just going plumb crazy. But this Sapphire Island crisis, this gives us a chance to stand up and say, look, we have traditions, we value those traditions, and we demand that you stop encroaching on those conditions. Rafa, is there an established or a contact line, source, person that the audience can reach out to and lend their support in an organized way?
Well, they can contact their congressional representative. That's who operates for their area. Because, as you know, our show reaches so many throughout the country. So it would be best if they contact their representative in Congress and in the Senate as well.
Ashe. And we have international past the hour, and we have international audience. And while they may not Pan-Africanism meets African traditional spirituality, with your hosts, brothers Ifabegmi, Oshundeli, and me, Brother Wole Mango Ifa. And sitting in the ANU Asafo studios this week, is our special featured guest, Oluwo Awo Ifabemi Faseye. Now, Baba Ifabegmi is the founding head priest of the Faseye Institute for the Study of Nature. He has served as a healer and diviner of indigenous spiritual traditions for over 15 years now, beginning with formal initiation into Tibetan Buddhism, Sanatana Dharma, and finally graduating into the ancestral West African traditions of Nigeria. Currently, Baba Ifabegmi is initiated into several priesthoods within the Ifa system, some of which include Ifa. Currently, Baba Ifabegmi is currently initiated into several priesthoods in the Ifa system, some of which include Ifa, Obatala, and Oshun. He has also earned a graduate diploma in traditional Chinese medicine and mastered other traditional healing methods alongside his own continuing spiritual growth. His professional and personal experience has laid the solid foundation for his becoming the strong community leader that he is today. Now, while continually learning from the wisdom of his Ifa elders, Baba Ifabegmi practices and teaches the essence of Ifa in its universal language, which brings a unique balance and holistic approach to the healing of the mind, body, and spirit. Baba Ifabegmi's goal in establishing the Faseye Institute for the Study of Nature is to foster life-affirming practices that assists clients and godchildren worldwide by integrating various aspects of the sacred science of Ifa into their day-to-day lives. This is accomplished through healing rituals, initiation ceremonies, workshops, speaking engagements, and interfacing with the community on a grassroots level. Baba Ifabegmi also serves on the board of directors of the Earth Medical Alliance, a non-profit 501c organization located in San Francisco's Bay Area, centered around supporting Earth, honoring religious traditions, spiritual practices, and ways of life.
That I needed to have with those other backgrounds with my parents, and so I wasn't quite sure what that meant. And so that sort of began a process of really looking even deeper to what type of indigenous, African practices that my ancestors may have practiced. And so then that started the long quest of, going out of my way to do research and looking things up online and trying to make connections with teachers of various African traditions to find what I thought would work for me.
Ashe. Baba Ifabegmi, according to the information you provide the public on your website, which, by the way, is called oracleifa.com, ORACLE, IFA.com. What exactly does it mean when you say you teach from the essence of Ifa in its universal language, which brings about a unique balance and holistic approach to the healing of the mind, body, and spirit, end of quote?
Well, that's a good question. So when we talk about, teaching the essence of Ifa and its universal language, a lot of times people say that Ifa deals with signs and symbols that are veiled in what we call allegory. So when you're talking about things like allegory, that's sort of a blanket term for describing the human condition. And so you'll hear many of the stories, and the Ifa corpus will say, this person came before a Babalawo, and it'll give the name of the client, the name of the person that they went to see, and it'll state this is what their problem was. And then the Babalawo consulted Ifa. Ifa gave a particular odu as well as a prescription about what was appropriate for that person's situation. And so Ifa, in some ways, you could say there are you could almost say there's almost different denominations or different schools of thought or practices of Ifa, much like in, Tibetan Buddhism or Christianity or various other world religions. There's not any one thing. One could be a Christian and one could be a Mormon, some could be a Seventh-day Adventist, a Catholic, Baptist, Jehovah's Witness, any number of things. Well, even within Ifa, there's various schools. So depending upon where one's built, where the particular village that someone is working at, there's various schools of Ifa.
Sort of my viewpoint on this sort of our returning to our roots. I think we have to. I think in order to do this, again, it's just my personal opinion, but I think that when we're talking about addressing going back to whatever our ancestral roots are, I think we have to define what that means. Africa is a large continent, and literally you can fit, you could fit a little over 3 times the United States inside the continent of Africa. So that's a lot of space. And so when we talk about things like Pan-Africanism, we talk about returning to our ancestral roots. Well, what exactly are we talking about? So, which part of Africa are we referring to? Everyone likes to go back to Egypt and refer to Kemet and so on, but that's only one part of Africa. That's North Africa. What about Eastern Africa? What about Central Africa? What about West Africa? So I think when we talk about returning to our ancestral traditions, I think we have to define what that means exactly. And I think that just saying Africa is a little too vague. And so I think we have to, I think if we're going to talk about returning to our ancestral traditions, ancestral roots, I think we need to get a little more specific about what exactly that means. Which part of Africa are we talking about? Because if it's ancestral, then it means that it needs to be connected to where our ancestors came from. So does that mean that all of our, if we obviously we know our ancestors came from Africa, but which parts of Africa did our ancestors come from? maybe some of us, our ancestors, came from Central Africa. Maybe some came from Nigeria. Maybe some came from Ghana or from Togo. So if we're making a return back to the practice of our ancestors, then we need to get specific about where we're talking about going back to. Because just referring to Africa, that's a lot of space, and it's in my opinion, I think it's a little bit of a big answer.
So true, so true. Now, about the second part of the question, how would you describe your worldview philosophy? Pan-African or something else, or do you have a name for it?
I don't know that I have a name for it. I don't think I've ever defined what my perspective or my philosophy is. If we're talking about Pan-Africanism, simply meaning that I embrace my ancestry of coming from Africa and my ancestors coming from there, and embracing what that means for that, and being comfortable in being comfortable as who I am as a black man of African descent. And being able to interface and work with people from the place that I'm coming from, then yes, I mean, one could say that, sure, I'm fine with saying that if that's what we're talking about. If, there's different schools of thought of Pan-Africanism. Some schools of thought of Pan-Africanism, these are balanced, and that, it's important to have compassion for other people. And that, in addition to knowing, having the knowledge of how to create, of how to defend oneself or how to create bodily harm or damage to people, it's important to also be able to know how to restore whatever it is that you damage or whatever it is that you hurt. Because it's a big part of the arts and things that I trained. It was really about encouraging humanity, and so for me, the aspects of the various healing traditions. It helps me to have a more balanced perspective in dealing with just people across the board. People generally tend to show up in these things, spiritual traditions, whatever else, because people are looking for some form of healing. And so, there's different ways to be able to heal people. If one goes from an African perspective, from an Esau perspective, generally people who work with herbs and do different aspects of medicine and things like that, work with plant medicine, they refer to them as Unshigun. So they're medicine men. They women. They deal with the herbs and with plant life and understanding how those things are used to restore physical health. And so from a Chinese perspective, they may call it acupuncture or qigong or tuna. Some people practice different things, hands-on healing, Reiki, things like that. I think all those things are important, and I think it helps to bring a balanced perspective. Just based upon my own experiences, and again, it's still growing and expanding, and it's not by any means that it represents how everybody's doing it throughout Africa. But I've seen a lot of commonalities between the things of what I've seen different Asian traditions practice in terms of their healing. I've seen many of those same things used in Africa. Many times folks will have different things they refer to as accouché, or different spiritual medicines that they've charged with incantations and with prayers and things like that, different herbs and bark and leaves, things that may be used up from animals or whatever else, that they burn down into ash. And then these things have the effect of being able to, ward off negativity, bring in prosperity, more money, luck, love, spouse, whatever things, just the various things that people seek in their day-to-day life. Different forms of Asian medicines that I practice do the same thing. They just refer to it as calcification, which just simply means that you're burning things down to ash. And they're using prayers and incantations and things like that in order to be able to restore that health. So, I think a lot of these things, I think that many of these different practices have more in common than people may realize or may be even willing to acknowledge. And so, for me, I feel like with Arba there at the temple, and I started off with my studies of Ifa with a Babalawo named Ifabemi. He was one of my teachers. He's a former teacher of mine now. We're no longer working together. But I started off with him, and he provided me with the foundation that we started in Ifa. And one of the things that had been, that I had the opportunity to be able to see was
various different ways of Ifa. Some teachers of Ifa like him, and obviously there's a lot of Ifabemis out there, so I'm not going to put anybody on blast about who owns who, but some people practice traditional, some people practice traditional in the Lucumí system, the Cuban and the traditional system, and I think there's benefit in the both. Ifa says that one hand washes the other, and they both wash the face. And so I had the opportunity to be able to see the practice and the approach to Ifa from a traditional perspective as well as from a Cuban perspective. And I think they're both good. I think they're both applicable. I think it just comes down to what works for one particular person. I've also had opportunity to be able to work with Chief Obafemi Ifayemi, who's a Maigun Awo Odiremo. I've had opportunity to be able to work with him and spend a considerable amount of time working with him and studying with him here probably the last 3.5 years or so, mentoring with him and just getting a lot of experience about leadership. So he's one of the teachers I've worked with out of Odiremo. He's a chief in Odiremo. He lives here in the States. He's in Texas.
Is that the owl from who's based in Houston, Texas?
Yes. He's based in Houston, Texas. Yeah. He's a very very nice, very knowledgeable Babalawo that I've had opportunity to be able to spend some time mentoring with him and working with him. He takes frequent trips out here from time to time, and I've had a chance to be able to go out with him in some of his work and studies as well. I've had opportunity to work with some of the other priests that he's referred me to as well. Baba Ifabegmi, Babalawo out of Bimi, that I've had a chance to be able to do a little bit of work and study with him. I've had some opportunities to be able to take several trips to Nigeria, and I've been exposed to some of the methods that are done in Oshobo, some of the methods done in Oyo, some of the methods done in Odiremo. I don't claim to represent any one particular lineage. I represent Ifa. I represent the teachings of Oromila. And so I don't claim to be a representative or, spokesperson for anyone that they have a good teacher-student relationship with.
Ashe, oh, beautiful. That's beautiful, Baba. And that's what I kind of think of as American Ifa. A contemporary, very traditional thing, all mixed up together in New Orleans, and we call it something like that gumbo.
That's what I was going to say. That's our gumbo here. So our Ifa gumbo.
Ashe. Baba Ifabegmi, one of the great criticisms, however, of American Ifa practitioners has to do with our use of titles. For instance, many individuals will get an initiation, a Tefa ritual, and come back to the United States or from wherever, and immediately start referring to themselves as Babalawo. And right. When they haven't done much study or any at all, just gone through a ritual. I have two questions here. The first one, I'm just going to ask you individually. You currently hold the title of Oluo. Please explain to the listening audience just what an Oluo is, including some of the responsibilities and the process of reaching such a position.
An Oluo is simply a teacher of Ifa. So it's someone who's an elder teacher. So by definition, if someone has godchildren, if one is a Ifa priest and the person has godchildren, they may be referred to by their godchildren as that person's Oluo. So they are that person's teacher, or some people will use the term to say a master teacher. It just depends upon, there's various schools of thought. There's no one particular answer that is the correct answer for what that title means. Sometimes Oluo will refer to one who owns the sacred Odu pot. So there's various different types of tefa. There's a tefa, which what they refer to as Elegan, which is one does not see or does not review or receive the Odu pot, Iba Odu, the wife of Oromila. And there's Itel Odu, in which one will view the Odu pot
And then some teachers, some people may receive, or some awos may receive initiation and receive the sacred Odu pot. So the Odu pot is said to sort of give a person ritual permission to be able to do the work of Ifa. It may involve giving hand to Ifa or mounting and consecrating orishas that they have training and knowledge of how to give. Obviously, having an Odu pot is necessary for doing tefa, for actually doing the initiation itself. It doesn't mean that if someone doesn't know how to do the ritual, that they should be performing it. And so Oluo is a title that can mean someone who has an Odu pot. I myself am the owner of an Odu pot. I do receive Iba Odu from my tefa, sharing information with you. So they're your father and Ifa. They're guiding you and bringing you up in the teachings of Ifa. So it's, there's a lot of different, long story short, there's a lot of different ways to sort of, there's a lot of different ways to approach it.
Thank you so much for clarifying some of that for us. That seems to be a big source of confusion, especially people who just go to Nigeria, get dropped off, have a ritual, and they come back and they are not even working with anyone, much less having an ongoing relationship with the people who initiated them. And many of them think they are Babalawos. So
that's a big thing. I mean, that happens a lot. You see that pretty often. I definitely think it's not wise for one who just came back from an initiation to suddenly say, hey, I'm an instant Babalawo overnight and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we don't always know. I try to stay out of judgment about things like that because personally, I don't know what everybody's background is before they got initiated as priests. I don't know if that person spent a few years training and studying with whoever it was that took them to be initiated. Perhaps some of these people spent 2 or 3 years training with somebody and learning and being shown various aspects of Ifa and how to do certain things. And then for them doing their tefa actually was the actual ritual permission for them to be able to start working. So, there's a lot of different conditions upon which people may decide to go out and start doing it. And I think that it's easy to come to judgment about those things when we don't quite know all the circumstances behind why people are doing certain things. People have falling outs with folks all the time. Folks go off to Africa, they get initiated. They don't ever talk to people in Nigeria anymore and whatever else. They lose contact. They don't have a number for that person. They're unable to be able to work with that person. Or, there's a lot of Ifa orphans out, so to speak, out there. And so, I think that people try to work with, and I like to believe that folks are trying to work with and do the best they can with what they have to work with. And I think as long as folks are continue to approach things from a place of sincerity and trying to do their best and try to have a relationship with and working with those who know more than them and whatever, that's in many cases, sometimes that's the most that people can do. And I think that Ifa will direct them and take them to the places of where they need to go to be able to continue to round out their training if that's what they're sincerely looking for.
Ashe. That's a very holistic, humanistic way of looking at it.
With those types of things. It may be the person needs to receive an initiation, but it may be someone that it may be a better fit for them to receive an initiation from, for various reasons. Maybe somebody that has a certain different life experience and different background and different things that they can help to facilitate that person continue to grow from that initiation, the capacity that I may not be able to. I mean, I can't do everything. No one can. No one person can do everything entirely by themselves. That's why generally Ifa is done as a community. It's not just one Babalawo who just travels around and just flies all over the world and gives everybody all these initiations and then just drops off a bunch of kids. I mean, we already have that in this country, right? We have people who just off making a bunch of babies with people and then drop them off and don't have any responsibilities for these children that they're making. It's no different in Ifa. People initiate all sorts of people. People get all these pots and shrines of things, and they never hear anything back from the person who initiated them. And so I think that people have to just be responsible and really take that into account. So I tend to I try to do a lot of quality control. I don't take on, a whole bunch of people. I don't have a gigantic elay with 150, 250 godchildren all over the country, despite what people have said before. I don't have anything anywhere near that level. And you have to really be good at delegating things. I spend a lot of time delegating things to folks. So there are certain people in the group that I have that are initiated priests that I've initiated. And so there may be aspects that they're really good at, that they have some understanding about how to do certain things for people. And so we're able to delegate, different aspects of things that people may need help with to them. Because it can be a lot to try and deal with it and try to take on everything entirely by yourself. That can be a pretty big task. So I try to take on everything one by one, and I let Ifa just sort of guide me and tell me what exactly it is that I need to do. And there are some cases that I may have to contact someone else in another state or contact someone else in Africa or whatever else and ask for insight. I mean, there's many times that there's certain information that may come out in Odu's, whatever else, that I may not have all the information I need to know about how to work with that particular Odu or what else is necessary for that person. And so that's why it is important to have a relationship with elders. I mean, even for those of us who are doing, and we refer to as Ifa Gumbo or whatever else, I think a lot of people misinterpret that to mean that we're just mavericks and we're just bucking with tradition and just saying we're just off doing our own thing. And that's not really what's being said at all. It really just tends to refer more to the fact that I'm not Nigerian. I wasn't born in Nigeria. I do have ancestry from my father's side that were Yoruba, but I was born here in America. And so if we're talking about coming at Ifa from a position of like Ogunda, Ifa says, he talks about traditionalism, they refer to as Isheshe and Ogunda. He says, Odemar is one's Isheshe. Isheshe is what you peace for Ipi Orisha. He says that one's father is one's Isheshe. Isheshe we have to peace for Ipi Orisha. One's mother is one's Isheshe. Isheshe we have to peace for Ipi Orisha. So I'm just paraphrasing. He says Isheshe is the father of all Etutu. Isheshe for mother's lineage, Isheshe for father's lineage. May they all give approval before we appease in Orisha. And so when we talk about those things, that means that we have to approach things from the perspective of where our ancestors came from. So if my ancestors were not born directly in Africa, which mine weren't and many of us weren't, then that means we have to approach the tradition. If Ifa says that we have to give veneration to our ancestors first. And that may mean that some of the things that are done in Nigeria that some of my current ancestors that I know of who have passed on may not recognize or have any awareness of certain things that I'm trying to do with them here. And so that's all that means. There may be people who come to me that may be Asian or they may be Caucasian or Hispanic or whatever else. Again, not saying that the rituals and things that we do from Africa are wrong, because everything is, everything works, but it's all about what's appropriate at what. And I think that falls. I think that falls for anybody. I mean, whatever it is that you're doing, I think people should find folks that they feel comfortable with, and folks that are going to be able to give them the tools for them to be able to be their highest version of themselves in whatever capacity that is, male, female, whatever their particular position is. I think it's a funny question because a lot of times many of the people that I see having these discussions about talking about re-empowering women are men, and I find it laughable that men can even sit back and have a conversation about talking about re-empowering women as if women suddenly don't have any power. They're the ones who hold all the power. How is a man going to give a woman something back that she never gave him in the first place? It's hers. They bring us into this world. They're the ones who are responsible for birth. They have all sorts of ashe and powers and understanding and mysteries of things that there's no way that we're going to be able to give them any kind of perspective on. All we can do is just be supportive. And I think that that's important. I think that a lot of times our sisters don't receive the type of support for being able to tap into their own gifts and be able to use this technology to do certain things. There's a few different schools of thought on Ifa that say some things. Some people say that women are, some people refer to women, obviously refer to the mothers as Iyami, my mothers, right? So obviously there's Iyami dealing with the Society of the Wise Women, or, people refer to as the Council of Female Elders. Some people refer to them as witches. There's a lot of different things that people refer to them as. Different perspectives we'll refer to. Eventually, we'll talk about the divine feminine. So really, you can't even practice Ifa if you're not giving a veneration to the divine feminine. Because if everything comes from Odu, right? So when everything is Odu Ifa. So Odu is what? It's dark matter consciousness, that which is unseen, that which is unrevealed, that which is seeking to have an experience. So, as priests, we're trying to pierce the veil of that which is unseen.